You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream. You're listening to Disruptive Adventism, a podcast about community, conversation, and conflict, where your ideas, traditions, and practices can be analyzed and changed. My name is Jose Briones, and I invite you to listen, to learn, and to live a life of purpose and disruption. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to Disruptive Adventism. Today, our topic is on higher education and the different forces that may be disrupting this space. We have invited Professor of Mathematics at Andrews University, Anthony Bosman. Anthony, how's it going?
It's going well. Glad to be with you.
Thanks for being here with us. We appreciate your time to talk about this very important topic and how Adventism relates to higher education. So, as always, we try to give a little bit of background to our audience, who you are, what are you doing, what are the future projects, where are you from, anything that you seem or deem relevant to share with our audience. Go ahead, give us a little bit of your bio.
Oh, yeah, good question. So since we're talking about higher education, maybe I'll focus on that. I attended for undergraduate at Stanford University, and then I did my graduate studies at Rice University in Houston. I've also, done classes and various studies experiences, places like Oxford and elsewhere, and community college took classes there. And so I spent a lot of time in various university settings. And now, like you mentioned, I'm here at Andrews University. And so over the last decade, 12 years or so, I've been thinking a lot about the nature and purpose of higher education.
What would you say that is that nature, that purpose of higher education? Since you have a vast experience, that you have been in different settings, from community college to other institutions, even graduate degrees, how have you seen that? What's the main purpose of higher education in this space?
Yeah, so I think the simple answer is we don't know. And so we have lots of different institutions trying lots of different things, and there's no unified vision of this is what higher education is. And there's some really good historical reasons for that. So, you can go back a couple hundred years, and the purpose of universities, colleges is primarily to train people for the ministry. And so when this is the purpose, there's this kind of goes back to this medieval vision of we have this unified body of knowledge. Theology is queen of the sciences. And here we are, we're taking these boys and we're turning them into men who can be ministers, right? But then what you have is two things start happening. One is rather than colleges and universities being restricted in their attention to the ministry, you start moving towards a research model. You start having things like mathematics displace theology. You start having more emphasis on the sciences, and then later the humanities make a comeback. And so you have these various competing goals of a university. And also you start having universities open up to a lot more people. So instead of universities just being for the rich, for the elite, for this one class, we start trying to say we want to see universities as an equalizer for all different kinds of peoples and classes to have opportunities to join the workforce and live up to the fullest potential. And so as this has happened over the last 50 years, but even longer term over the last 300 years, you've seen a transformation in what universities are trying to do. And so now we have very many different kinds of institutions, all doing slightly different things.
That's a very well put out summary. I think that do comprehend, or you kind of grab a lot of historical period and kind of align to the conversation. So what is it happening now is because there are different trends within that higher education today. There's a trend that's still necessary, still important. Go get your college degree. And then there's a trend that's like, well, higher education is not really that great. Why don't we follow the so-called examples or successful people of the world, such as Bill Gates and Steve Jobs? Like, they went to these colleges, but they realized that this was not what they were supposed to do. And then they monetized their skills. They did their own thing. What are some of the factors that you see changing in the conversation of higher education today? It's not the ministry anymore. We have many different avenues. Is that a problem?
Yeah, this is a great question. So first, let me engage with this question about Bill Gates and these other individuals who, drop out of college. And when they do so, they then go on to found something like Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, or others, and they become filthy rich, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, why don't we all just do that? And the answer there is, well, there's a really strong sampling bias, right? Like, you only hear the stories of those who drop out and become incredibly rich. And so you don't hear the stories of the, thousands of people who this is not the end result for them. And so I don't recommend this as a path. You're unlikely to achieve the same success as they did. And it's also important to recognize that many of these individuals, they drop out of places like Harvard or elsewhere where they had a really strong social network they were able to tap into. And so for the typical individual, they don't have the same kind of setup as these people did, who you might say were already incredibly privileged or had incredible social capital they could cash in while still, sophomore in college or whatever it may be. As for what's happening in higher ed, we could zoom out and look at what's happening in the economy more generally. So, for instance, Toys R Us just shut down. I went there a couple of months ago with my nephew. It was like the last going out of sale, sale they were having, not a business sale. And so why is Toys R Us shutting down? Well, it's because who's going to drive to Toys R Us to buy a toy when you can just go to Amazon and order something and get it, the next day or possibly even the same day if you live in a city. Or you can look at like taxi services. Who looks for a taxi now when you just have an Uber app? Right? And so we see lots of different industries are being transformed by us beginning to use the internet in some really smart and some really clever ways. And so one prediction, the University of Oxford has a study that suggests that by 2050, half of existing jobs will disappear. And so that's incredible. Think about like the person who checks you out at the store or someone who washes your car or whatever it may be. Like, half of these jobs are going to disappear because of forces such as automation, digitalization, globalization. There are all these things taking place where we're taking jobs and we're replacing them, automating them, or moving them online to these digital spaces, and we're transforming entire industries. And so the question is, if we see this happening with retail stores, if we see this happening with transportation, what can we expect to happen to higher education?
Now, with the Toys R Us example, they're kind of coming back as well. Last time I read, they were shutting down, and there's like, oh, just kidding, we're actually back. They kind of, I don't know if they're trying to rebrand. Maybe that's like a part of the conversation of higher education. That it's like, but can you really replace a degree? I mean, with an online version, for example, or like some online tool, or maybe you see on YouTube all of these, courses, right? It's like, oh, take my course, pay me like $100 and learn how to make all of this money, or maybe a seminar. Can you really do that? I mean, I went to college, I really liked my experience. Maybe I'm a little bit biased in this case, but I also understand, people that have a niche or they have a talent that they can exploit on their own, and they have gone without college, and maybe they've done it online, or, they don't go to this institution, get in debt. That's another thing but is higher education being disrupted, being changed? Is it because of what is it going to transition to? Because I don't see something that it can be replaced.
I mean, one might think that maybe one day we won't need physical buildings for universities, and everyone can just go online wherever they're at based on their schedule and, do these courses. You already have many people taking online classes, and that works out pretty well for quite a few people. But the question is, does doing this change the nature of higher education? Right? And so before we make this transition, we should think about, well, what does this mean for what higher education is, or transforming what it is fundamentally? And so come back to this question of what is the purpose of higher education? A few things I'll point out. First of all, if you simply think the point of higher education is to get a degree, then yes, there are online programs that will give you a degree. And so you might think, okay, I've succeeded in getting the degree, and that's fantastic. But there's a couple of weaknesses of online programs. One is the completion rate. If you just look at online courses, especially massive open online courses, you have huge numbers of people sign up to take them, but many of these have a completion rate of less than 10%.
Wow.
And so there's something that is lost, that somehow student motivation, these other factors seem to be lost.
Do you think it's mainly because of personalities? I mean, like, I think because, for example, I know that I've been able to complete online courses, right? Yep. And it's because I have self-determination and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to get done, sit down. But there are people that need the teacher to be there one-on-one, explaining them, guiding them.
When did you complete your online courses?
Just past this summer, this past summer.
So you had already gone through a college experience.
Yes.
That taught you how to think and act and complete a college course.
Right.
And after doing that, then you're able to supplement your education pretty well with online courses.
Right. Well, even then, like when I was in community college, like my first semester, I took an online course and I was just coming out of high school. And especially, I did not go to high school in the States. So I finished high school outside of the States and came here and I had an online course. And I mean, I guess like I had the blended experience where I was doing something and then that kind of work ethic kind of translated. Now, I will say that it's a very different experience because I think things go out of my mind.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's online. Yeah. Oh man, I missed the deadline. Or wait, that report is due today, and that happens in classrooms already. I mean, I can imagine that this is a problem within the online system. Like, so I don't really think that higher education will be replaced, but you seem to.
Well, I think the hybrid model you pointed to is a very successful one, and the future of higher education will include lots of online components. But to think that it can be moved entirely online for all students, there's a number of reasons we might push back on that. The first is there's something called the hidden curriculum. And that's all the learning that happens on a campus outside of a classroom, outside of a lecture, outside of you doing assignments, right? It's you and your classmates talking about that idea around the table at lunch afterwards. It's you staying up late at night in the dormitory, wrestling with these ideas. It's you living in community with people from very different parts of the world, being exposed to the very different ways of thinking and living and being and wrestling through that. And so there's all these other aspects of being in a community, in a scholarly environment that are transforming you, maybe totally unaware of, but that's lost, and it's very difficult to see how that can be moved to an online environment. I would say also, if we simply think about higher education as pushing content into the minds of students, then yes, online is a great way to do this. YouTube videos, easy, you can push content into people's minds as much as you want. But if we think of higher education as something more ambitious, as creating citizens, okay, wow, if I want someone to become a citizen, what does that actually mean? This means something about their interpersonal skills. It means something about their way of interacting with others. It means them developing some leadership skills. It means they're going to need a broad base of knowledge. They're going to be broadly interested in lots of different arenas of economics and science and all these areas that we want our citizens to be informed in. We need them to learn how to argue well, right? We need them to be able to filter through information. So there's like, if we want them to be a citizen, that's a really ambitious goal. If we want them to not only be a citizen of this world, but perhaps as a Christian, you would say, we also want them to be a citizen of this heavenly kingdom. Well, that's an even more ambitious goal. And that's going to include components, some of which is content, but some of which are just ways of living and being and existing in community, in a transformative scholarly community. That's difficult to see how that can be moved entirely online.
Now, is that really the conversation that we're having within employers in higher education, however? Because, I mean, I got my degree, right? But it felt like I just needed to get the degree in order to open certain doors for me to go work. My employer wasn't really looking at what I learned, how I did it, the conversations late at night in the dorm. My employer was just like, do you have the degree?
But who cares what your employer thinks, right? Like, you're not just going to college to get a job.
Well, but a lot of people think that.
Yeah, and this is one vision of higher education, and I think it's a very destructive one.
But isn't that what employers and sometimes the universities are kind of selling? Because when I see an advertisement from any university, what I see is, come here, get your MBA. This is prestigious. You can get a better degree, and there's no emphasis on, wow, come here and you're going to have awesome conversations. I don't see the dorm being portrayed. I see the classroom and the MBA program or the MDiv or the PhD or the bachelor's in arts. Like, they kind of emphasize hey, come here, you get your degree, and you'll be able to work here.
Yeah, well, the reason they do that is because the research shows that Gen Z are most concerned about financial stability. And it makes sense because they grew up through the recession. And so their biggest goal is to get the career at the end of the degree. And so the advertisements are just responding to the market demand. But regardless of how the universities are branding themselves and regardless of what your employer wants, you should be thinking at the end of this, I need to be a citizen, right? So even if I want to be a nurse, and as a nurse, don't need to know very much about economics. As a citizen who's voting on policy, I probably should know something about economics. Maybe I want to be something that has nothing to do with science at all. But as a citizen who's making decisions in a democracy, I need to know something about science, right? In addition to that, not only are you a citizen, you're human. And you should be an interesting human. And the best way to be an interesting human is to be interested in a lot of stuff. And so at university is this really exciting time where you have these experts who are on the cutting edge, who are pushing the frontiers of knowledge. And they say, let me walk alongside you and bring you out here to the edge of knowledge. And it's a really unique period of your life. And when else in your life, after college, you're married, you're stressed, you have bills, all these other things are competing for your attention. But a university is an opportunity for someone to come into a community and be exposed to new kinds of questions they never would have been exposed to before.
Now, but that's 4 years.
Yeah.
That's just 4 years of your life. And isn't the hope that, that these 4 years are going to continue and that you're going to continue?
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope. And then you continue to take online classes and you continue to, at night, not just watch Netflix, but read Plato. And you continue to be a person who's interested in lots of things and not just someone who's defined entirely by a job, but is a whole person, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, yes. And I think that would be an ideal.
Yes.
Yet the way that I see higher education marketing things, it's not necessarily training you to. Yeah. Am I being trained in school?
The problem is it's expensive.
Okay.
Right? This takes a whole lot of time, right? If we're not just going to care about people's content, but we also want to care about their wellness, we want to care about them learning how to live in diverse community, we want to care about them gaining global perspective, we want to care about them developing leadership skills. That takes a whole lot more administrators, that takes a whole lot more residential leaders, that takes a whole lot more people intentionally walking someone along these roads, and that's really expensive, right?
Do you think that maybe one of the reasons why this is so expensive, and maybe I'm just kind of thinking, maybe one of the reasons that this could be maybe changed is that a lot of universities emphasize the 4-year degree. Could we turn that model differently towards, it sounds crazy, right? It sounds like, wait, you're going to expand it from 4 years to 6 or 7. But when you really think about it, when I start thinking about it, right? It's like, let's say a Gen Z coming out of high school, right? 18 years old, going into college right now. You finish in 4 years, you're going to be 22. 22 is not that, big of a deal, even though Taylor Swift may disagree with me. At the same time, it's like, when you're 22, you haven't accomplished much. We have research that has gone into this, that you take, in order for your first big accomplishment to kind of occur, it's like at the age of 35.
Yeah.
Right. So from 22 to 35, that's 17 years, right? No, 13 years. JK. You're looking at me like I'm a math professor. Get your math right. Yeah. I took calculus, by the way. So, hey, at least I was able to catch my math.
And that makes you a more interesting person.
Yeah, I guess so, Yeah. But you have, so from 22 to 35, you have 13 years, right? Maybe we can push it down to maybe get out of college when you're 24. Are we pushing people too early?
This is already happening. You already have trends for people to take, on average, longer than 4 years to get through college. And, this
but that's not the marketing plan.
It's because it's more expensive, but if you're doing work study and you're working alongside, it isn't necessarily more expensive. I'm a really big proponent of people taking a gap year after high school. I think when they do that, do some kind of service activity, do some kind of internship, do some kind of meaningful activity during that time.
They get to know the world.
Yeah, and then when they go to college, they're more focused, and what they're learning makes more sense to them. They understand why they're learning it. Big fan of internships during the summer for this reason as well. But I want to go back to this issue you raised earlier about employers, all they want is a degree. And, if you're just focused on a job, you should just take the shortest path, the path of least resistance to get the skills needed for that degree and not worry about all these other things about being an interesting human and being a good citizen and all that, flowery language. But the problem with this is I just cited the study that said by 2050, half of currently existing jobs will be gone. Right? And so it's like, we don't know what that half will be. We don't know what jobs that currently exist are going to disappear over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so in order for you to be a competitive individual, you, in some sense, need to be well-rounded. And there's two areas you really need to be competent in. The first area is you need to be competent in interacting with automation, with machines, with these things. Everyone should take a programming class, I believe. Everyone should have some knowledge of how to interact with information and with automation and with digitalization. Everyone should be fluent in this context. But the second area you need to develop literacy in is you need to develop those aspects of being human that we cannot automate. Right? So there's some things we can automate very easily, simple 2-second task, but things like creativity, things like leadership, things like ethics, these deeply, truly human things we cannot automate. And in order for us to remain viable and competitive in the upcoming economy, you want to distinguish yourself from the simple tasks that can be automated. And so this is where I think higher education is, this is a great opportunity for Adventists in particular, because we have a vision of higher education that comes down to our vision of what it means to be human. And so for Adventists, we've always understood that true education is developing the whole human. And so if you start talking about the whole human, your well-being, your spiritual life, your critical thinking skills, but all these things in conjunction, this is a picture of humanity that can't be replaced by some machine, right? So this is a picture of a human who's going to be essential in the emerging marketplace. We talked about some of the ways, taxis are being disrupted by Uber. There's currently this move to self-driving cars, right? And it's like, okay, so that's one area that's being disrupted. But then you ask, but who's the person programming this? And when they program it, how do they solve ethical dilemmas like, if you're about to hit someone on the road, do you kill them or do you swerve and potentially kill yourself? Right? There's an ethical dilemma in how you program these things. And suddenly you see programming and ethics go hand in hand. And so what we need is individuals who are competent in some area, but also are competent as a broad human who knows how to think ethically, who knows how to reason systematically, who can think critically, who can problem solve, who is creative, who is culturally fluent, right, as we move into a more and more global economy. And so this is a vision that I think is at the heart of Adventist higher education, educating the whole person, that makes immense sense when you think about the way the economy is moving.
You have been privileged to attend both a public institution, a private institution, and non-Adventist, that's what I mean. And then you have you have been teaching, right, at Adventist institution. Now, I also went to a public college before I went to Adventist school. Right now, I'm finishing. I'm done at this point. But when I'm thinking about Adventist education, and you're saying that Adventists like to develop the whole person, is that happening right now as you see it in the campus that you're teaching? What are the contrasts? Because don't you think that there are some elements that may be missing from the Adventist ideal?
Yeah, I think our work-study program is not as strong as it was historically, and that's a serious loss. But there's some really cool efforts to re-engage that and to get more students working alongside the studies. I think that you could always fault find and find ways that we fall short. But I think this is something we're aware of, and it's something we're working towards. And I do see quite a bit of this taking place. I see people, especially our faculty, who are intentional in the formation of their students, not just to be worrying if the students got the content, but if the students are developing as people. And so I think that the true strength of institutions, whatever the weaknesses, and many of them may be, is the faculty that we have.
Now, one question that kind of comes to mind is this idea of Adventist education. We started without accreditation. Am I correct? And
this is an interesting contention, because some people think colleges should just be Bible colleges.
Right.
We should just be training people to go out and give Bible studies.
Because, when I think of Adventist education, right, and I think of the roots where we started Emmanuel Missionary College, there was kind of this ethic of, we're going to develop a person here so this person can go out and help the world.
Yeah, no, it's a compelling narrative, but it's completely false. If you look back, Ellen White, for instance, was very clear in her counsel that our students need to be prepared in our schools to take the state exams. So particularly in the medical field. And so she very early was articulating the need for us to be recognized as credible, to be recognized by the state as fully competent at preparing students to enter into these professions. And, the economy has changed quite a bit since it was at the late 1800s. But I think all the more so, we want students who are professional engineers, who are professional lawyers, professional doctors, all these different areas, but who we've trained to not just merely be an engineer or merely be a lawyer, or merely be a doctor or a nurse or whatever it may be, but to be a whole person who's passionate to, the way she put it in the book Education, someone who's committed their life to the joy of service, both in this world and the world to come. And that's a really attractive vision of what we want our graduates to be.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, we need to kind of revisit a little bit of the history. It's not necessarily like we started non-accredited and then we got accredited, and that's kind of like the evil thing.
Although, I just think that's a complete a myth. Yeah.
Would you say that it has brought debt, though? Will you say that it has brought, and is that a good thing?
That's a serious problem.
That is a serious problem. I mean, when you think about our facilities within 3 institutions, especially that rely from the North American division's budget, right? You have Loma Linda University, you have Andrews University, they're directly connected. And you have Oakwood, I believe, is now under the division and not under the conference. If I'm correct, if I'm not correct.
Oakwood has moved to the division.
To the division, okay. Yep. So now you have these institutions that, carry some debt for burden for the division in this case and for Adventists at large, because Adventists come from all over the world to these institutions. And sometimes it may be like, so what do we do with this financial component as well? How can we make sure, because there are different suggestions. Like, for example, Mormons have BYU, right?
Yep.
And it's only one institution.
Yep.
Literally, that's it. Everyone goes there and there's like some discount, right? If I understand correctly. But we have multiple institutions. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that financially, you're pulling a lot of money everywhere, instead of like centralizing that. Is that a good thing that we centralize?
This is a good discussion. First thing I should say is that this is not an Adventist problem. This is a higher education problem.
Okay.
So across the board, private universities across the board and public universities as well are facing financial difficulties. And so, yes, we are definitely, but that is a universal problem in higher education in the United States. Everyone recognizes higher education is expensive, right? As for a single institution, we are not the Mormons. I don't think that the model makes sense for us in the way it does for them. They're highly concentrated in Utah.
Right.
And so there's like a centralized place for them, and they have that history that we don't have. And for us, I think there are many people who send their students to one Adventist university, but not to another, because we have distinct flavors, distinct expressions of our universities. And maybe that's a good thing. But there are some really good conversations taking place right now between top administrators of the universities and the North American division about how we can share some of the administrative cost, how we can share some of the resources between the universities, so it can be more of a system that shares resources and administrative costs behind the scenes largely, rather than just a single standalone entities that are competing with each other.
If I understand correctly, and I think this was voted, I'm not sure if it passed, but I know it was voted this past convention, right? In August, I believe.
Yeah, there was a big meeting in Chicago where we had top administrators from the universities and the NADU present there. I was there for a couple of days of these meetings.
Right. And they tried to, is there like I think it's a unified curriculum? Is that what's going to...
It's not a unified curriculum. What's happening right now is still in the discussion phase and just looking at how we can share cost and share, maybe we don't need a registrar at each university. Maybe each university doesn't need its own administrative systems. Maybe even some of the courses could be shared using conferencing technology between institutions. Maybe we can have some degrees like PhDs or master's degrees that are shared between the faculty institutions of multiple places. So those are some of the ongoing discussions. Some universities are piloting different programs. And so it's really just an innovative phase right now, but we're kind of testing and seeing what can we do to still have the benefit of a small university, that small individualized expression, that small intimate connection with your faculty members that maybe you won't have at a large institution, but the benefits of being part of a large system and having that expertise and shared resources and economies of scale that comes from that.
And would you say that that is a good thing?
Oh, I think it's absolutely. It's necessary. They should have had these discussions 10, 20 years ago, in my opinion.
Okay.
And so I'm excited to see where they go.
Okay. Good. Well, as we continue kind of like starting to dwindle down a little bit into the discussion, so higher education is in a very troubled place.
Yeah.
It seems to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's challenged by different institutions, even within the religious institutions, like, you know, it's challenged by Bible colleges, challenged by the online programs, challenged by these people on YouTube that are making advertisements and saying that, hey, you can do these big things and big money. Maybe something that I really want to touch on is, why do people really believe in these non-higher education models?
Oh, I see.
You know, because, for example, I grew up outside the States, you know, and in my country, in Nicaragua, right? We go to college.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's the thing. Everyone has a degree. You know, college is at least the bare minimum that you're going to have. Yeah. Everyone is pushed towards that mentality. And that kind of creates another problem, which is like, you have a lot of engineers that are not able to be placed in their jobs, you know. I mean, I met a lot of engineers, a lot of people that were taxi cab drivers, you know, and you will think like, oh my goodness, they're wasting their talent. They're wasting their potential because they learn all of these equations and mathematics and physics and all of these things, but they ended up riding a cab. But the problem that we do not have is that we do not have there's ignorance everywhere, but at least more people are informed. Because more people went to college, more people tried it out, like, you know.
Interesting.
And I mean, I would even say, kind of venture to say that this happens at a large level within Central American countries, you know. And some people do drop out, you know, some people do not complete, but you have that mentality once you get out of high school. Literally 2 months after, you go and you take a test, and that test kind of tells you what you can aspire to be. You know, and let's say you get 100, you can have open range to any kind of school. If you get 80, you may not be able to be a doctor, but you can be a businessman or something like that, right? You get this access. And it's a little bit different than the States, where you can kind of work your way. It doesn't matter, you know, repeat courses or do stuff like that. And another thing is like, well, in my country, public universities are semi-free. You know, you maybe pay like a fee or something like that for your books. But why do people believe in this model? Is there something compelling? Is there something real about this? Is there something that you can say, you know what, this is going to be successful?
Like you don't need to go to college. You can just do X, Y, Z.
That's correct. You can do your, but because I have even seen people that try this way, and they kind of end up going to college, just not the traditional way. So does it really work?
Yeah. So, I don't actually believe everyone needs to go to college. Okay. I don't want to argue that at all. I think that many people do very well, especially in trade schools. Okay. And I would be very happy to see us beginning to teach them those trades earlier on, even in high school. Things like welding, things like carpentry, like many of these trades are trades that are projected to still be needed for the next several decades. There's no automation will transform some of them, but it does seem like this is a great option for many people. I don't want to talk down upon that at all. But I do hope that everyone tries to tap into the transformative experience that universities represent. Okay. And that may not look like everyone attending a physical campus for 4 years, sometimes not able to. But it may look like you're supplementing whatever you're doing with taking some online courses, with looking for some kind of community of scholarly community that will challenge you to think about things you weren't previously interested in, expose you to new lines of thought. It may look like, hey, you know, in the context of a Christian education, I want to be developed as a whole person, not just developed in this particular skill set. But maybe for whatever reason, I can't attend a Christian university right now. But maybe you can take some classes online, you know, that can help you develop a Christian worldview and really think about how your area of study integrates with your faith. So I think there are ways that universities still are centers and bastions of the transformative experience, but they're also centers of influence that spill out into the larger community. And if there's anything I think we can do better at, I mean, we have some of this online classes and online free online lectures people can watch, but I would like to see Andrews University and other Adventist universities move more in this direction of providing this influence to the greater Adventist community and to the greater world, where the things that happen on our campus, these transformative experiences, as much as possible, making this available to people wherever they're at. Be it through free online lectures, be it through free online courses, whatever it is, mini events, summer programs, where people throughout their entire life can continue to be transformed holistically.
So the theme that I gather from that is mainly the idea of continuing education.
Yeah,
It's just like you finish high school and you may not need to go to college, but you need to continue to be informed about what's going on in the world, what's going on with books. I think that a lot of people think of this, well, my profession is business, so I'm going to just get the business books. And you're not getting all of the other books that may talk about or that may disagree with you. I think that's one of the...
To be clear, I think college is a really, really good option for the vast majority of people. I'm just not ready to prescribe it as necessary for all individuals, or that somehow someone is like morally deficient or something if they choose not to go that route. Absolutely not. These other options make sense for a lot of people. But even once you graduate, I hope what a college degree is setting you up to do is setting you up for a lifelong of learning, right? So it's not that you have 4 years, especially because the economy is being transformed so quickly, you're going to need to constantly be reskilling yourself. It's projected that millennials are going to move through at least a dozen different industries in their lifetime. And so that's a crazy, a couple generations ago, you might go to high school or maybe just high school, maybe college, and then you have one job for like 40 years, right? And then you retire. Now it's like you're going to, every 4 or 5 years, we're moving to a different industry because the economy itself will be transforming so quickly under these influences of things like AI, as we automate, as robotization becomes a larger influence. And so as the economy moves, each one of us is going to be needing to reskill ourselves. And so a broad education can prepare you for that.
That makes me reflect a lot. That makes me think of, what can I do now that I'm continuing, in the journey. And of course, like some people are geared towards, hey, I want more education. I want a PhD. I want to teach at the university level. But some are like, well, it may work for me and I can just maybe attend different lectures, or maybe...
I think pastors are the best ones. Since you're in the seminary, I think pastors are the best model we have of lifelong learners. Consistently, pastors are surveyed, show they read the most books of any profession. And it makes sense because they have so many different roles that they have to fulfill, right? They're leading business meetings, they're thinking about finances, they're ministering to individuals, thinking interpersonal skills, they're trying to lead a community in some direction, they're trying to give spiritual guidance, they're trying to exegete some passage of scripture. There's so many different hats that pastors have to wear that they're constantly having to, they have some seminary experience that sets them up and gives them a broad base. But then throughout their lifetime, they're going to constantly need to be reskilling themselves and just refining the skills so that they're able to complete all those tasks.
Now, the reality is that not a lot of pastors do that,
Well, they should be. They should be.
Yes. And I think that that's something that, for example, on my time in higher education, I took as a project. I did things that were not necessarily the books that they assigned to me, but I read other stuff. And I'm really glad I did, because I learned different arguments from different people, and I was not just closed in one way. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your thoughts on higher education. And I think that definitely this podcast kind of leaves us thinking about what are some of the challenges and how we can solve them through maybe commonalities, maybe coming together and understanding and having different approaches to life and to education as a whole. Since that is our custom, well, we want to give you the last word. So go ahead. What's your message for us in higher education?
Yeah, there's this beautiful vision at the end of the book Education by Ellen White, where she says, heaven is a school. Its field of study, the universe. Its teacher, the infinite one. And this picture that we are to be forever students, we are to be forever learning. We are to be forever learning. And then that learning will transform itself into this joyful service towards humanity and towards God. I think that's a powerful vision that if we tap into that can inform how we model higher education today, but also remind us that we are to be lifelong learners. And so I think that's a really powerful vision for us to close with.
You've been listening to Disruptive Adventism. We hope that today's topic helped you to think and change something about your practices, about your faith, about your Adventism. If you want to subscribe, make sure to go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll be there. And make sure to give us a review if you like what you're listening to. If you want to support, make sure to go to patreon.com/disruptiveadventism. It helps us pay our bills and produce the content that you're listening to. And if you want to socialize, make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram or on Twitter, and hit us up whenever you need anything. We'll be there to support you. Thank you for listening today. We hope you join us next time. And as always, we invite you to be disruptive.